last week I made a video about how not to wear your belt. Now I want to share with why we should wear our belt properly and how to do that. So when we think about our body and creating what's called intra-abdominal pressure, we like to think of our torso as a can. We're going to fill that can up with air. Now, our pelvic floor acts as the bottom of the can, and our diaphragm, our thoracic diaphragm, acts as the top of the can, with our core and all of our musculature around our core acting as the 360 sides of the can. Okay, if I were to put my belt up around my rib cage, this is where my diaphragm lives. This would be like taking the top of a can and compressing it. Now, sure, that will create some downward pressure, but eventually that downward pressure, because I'm compressing around my thoracic diaphragm, eventually that downward pressure is going to take a toll on our pelvic floor, and the bottom of our can is going to end up blowing out. So, to combat that, we like to think about Newton's third law. Newton's third law is that every action has an equal and opposite reaction, or anything that is in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by another force. Now, where we take that is we want to create no motion. This is why we're using a belt to stabilize our core, is to limit the motion in our spine. So in order to do that, we need two equal and opposite forces working together at equal amounts in order to prevent some of that movement. So what we think about is pulling air in to our torso and using our musculature to push back. Okay, so that air is creating an outward force. Our muscles are creating an equal but opposite inward force. Now, what does that mean when we use a belt? A belt is exaggerating the amount of outward pressure that we're putting on so we can create more inward pressure. So if I'm compressing my core musculature more with a belt than if I weren't wearing a belt, I'm going to be able to create more pressure with my air. We want to create that in a 360-degree manner. So here are my 4 steps for proper breathing and bracing with a belt. First, I like to think about exhaling all of my air and getting my ribs down and back. When I do that, I think about then pulling my belly button into my spine. That engages our TA. That is a big muscle that kind of wraps around our torso, kind of like that can or the outside of a can. From there, I contract my pelvic floor, squeeze everything up and in, take a deep breath, and then I'm using the maximum amount of the belt to create more intra-abdominal pressure. Now again, when I wear my belt up here, it's like taking the top of this can and crushing it right here. What that's going to do is that's going to force a lot of pressure downward, and eventually, like I said, will take a toll on your pelvic floor and eventually your ability to create high intra-abdominal pressure that's going to sustain the amount of weight that you're moving. The other thing to think about with this is a lot of people will use it because of that cue that I said to get their ribs down and back. Now, a lot of people are stuck in this very extended position, so what they're going to try to do when they put the belt up here is use that belt to get their ribs down and back. Now, again, equal and opposite reactions in order to create stability or lack of movement. That means that just as much as this belt is squeezing my ribs are also going to create an opposite reaction against that as well, feeding into the compensation that you don't want. Flared ribs, I'm giving feedback to push these into my belt more in order to create stability, stillness, no motion. Okay, so proper way to breathe, brace, and belt. Belt in the middle of your torso, below your rib cage, somewhere above your hips. Someone like me needs to use a 3-inch belt because I have a pretty short torso. My rib cage ends right here. My pelvis starts right here. Okay, this belt is almost perfect for me. What I'm doing, exhaling air, getting my ribs down and back, okay? Squeezing my belly button towards my spine, pulling up my pelvic floor, and then breathing in a 360-degree manner so that I'm creating equal pressure around this belt and an opposite pressure back with my core and my air to create that stable brace.